Hi, Misha here, and this time I wanted to talk about one of the favorite ship names, or ship class names, throughout all of Star Trek. Antares, however you'd like to say it, which honestly dates back to the original series, and try to make a little bit of sense out of it. So I actually have 6 models all considered Antares on the table. So let's strike out the first ones. Here we have a freighter, Bajoran, later also seen in the hands of Cardassians. First seen in Next Generation, also in Deep Space Nine quite a bit. And this is an adaptation of the Husnock model, and it was referred to as Antares. But in this instance, it kind of seems to be shorthand for outdated low warp freighter. Next up, and again we're going chronologically, not internally to the series, but in the real world, we see this, the U.S.S. Antares, which was a background ship from Deep Space Nine. And this is very obviously a Miranda class, a Miranda variant. It just has a weapons pod on the back, kind of like the Phoenix, the Nebula type. And this just seems to be the ship's name, U.S.S. Antares. Okay, fair, fine. No relation to the freighter. And then finally, the last one we've actually seen on screen, although the first one to be mentioned, we have the freighter from Charlie X, the original series, another USS Antares, NCC 501. This is said to be a survey ship, a freighter, a cargo ship. Again, considered to be an older ship in that series, but still a Starfleet ship, certainly Federation. And while some will also say it's the Antares class, this doesn't really seem to be supported by anything aside from just tradition. We just know it's the USS Antares. And the reason it's last here in this little lineup, while it was in the original series, it was only referred to in the script and in dialogue by its name and whatnot. But actually we never saw this model until the TOS Remastered, which, when did that come out? Like 2006, 2007, and that was post-Enterprise period. But I'm very happy they did it, to give a few more Federation ships. And we can just say it's in the same naming convention lineage as the Miranda, leaving the old freighter here the odd man out. Now, moving on to what could be considered the traditional Antares class freighter, cargo, hauler, passenger ship. We have 3 models. As with the first 3, these are Eagle Moss. We have the Batris here. We have the Arcos here. And we have the Zoza, or Kzoza. Kizu. I don't know, I can't speak African, I apologize. Here. And even from the get-go, you can see that these are, generally speaking, of the same box-like shape. And even more than that, the model was actually the same studio model, just heavily modified each time. And again, these are all said to be dated ships, although in the time of Next Generation and DS9, they're all still active. These aren't relics or retired ships. And the Batrish here is one of the first ships we see in Next Generation. It's still in Season 1. It was towards the end of Season 1, the Heart of Glory. I always want to say the Heart of Darkness. And it's said to be a Tolarian ship. It's said to be an obsolete freighter or passenger ship that at least 3 Klingons, 3 renegades booked passage on, and then they took it over, and they used its outdated defense systems, which were said to be Mercurite rockets, to destroy a Klingon battlecruiser. Seems like they tricked the Klingons into lowering their shields, and then they hit them at point-blank range with these old, potentially maybe nuclear missiles, rockets. And, yeah, this model was, I guess you would say still made for Star Trek, although components of it were kind of cobbled together from other sources. Because again, it was just a model of the week for an episode, and it wasn't even really what you would consider a hero ship. It was just a ship that was on screen briefly and then it exploded. These on the sides here are said to be cargo pods. It is definitively warp capable. And certainly of an antiquated design, and it is specifically, expressly named as being a Antares class. And this is a relatively recent addition to the collection. Nice model, very simple, boxy, but that's okay. And it's also very metal. The most recent of the 3 here, this is said to be the Arcos, either U.S.S. Arcos or S.S. Arcos. Now what's interesting about this one, this is, if not a Starfleet ship, it is, at least presumably, a Federation registry, human registry ship. And you can see that it's a very similar design. In fact, they just took this model here and stuck some bits on, including these tubes. Add some more piping back here. Still has the basic cargo pods. And we see this reused several times in Season 2, 3, and 4. This model here, the Arcos, is from Legacy, Season 4. The episode where they go to Tasha Yar's home planet and meet her sister. Well, this was the ship that had an accident and exploded. And its 2-man crew, meaning this could be operated pretty small crew, escaped in an escape pod, which tells us it had a pod. And I think they mentioned their warp drive was going haywire, so we know it has warp again. It was a freighter type ship. So, yeah. Again, we only really see it on screen briefly before it blows up. And originally in the series, back when it was just the Next Generation, if I can get it on the stand, maybe I can. The stand clips on this one pretty good. It's a little bit tight, which is, there we go, pretty good thing. Anywho, it's said to have originally just been made up of a model of the Batris here, but when they went to the remaster, they ended up using this model because it's what they had in the HD remake. And oops. it was used a few more times as such. And then finally, the Zosa from Deep Space Nine, which is the most differentest of these. But really, if we look at it, it's essentially the whole rear section just flipped around, and the front end is moved around a bit, like you do. And it's still a cargo ship. This is the one captained by Cassidy Yates. This actually started off as the Narkova from Season 1 of DS9, which was the same model, just in a different color scheme. And it, too, was presumably, if not a Starfleet ship, at least a Federation ship. And then the Zosa, with a slightly different paint job, would come in later by Season 3. And it, too, would be considered an Antares class. It's still a freighter. Although it is a Petrarian registry, not human. So, what can we tell of these and these? What is going on with the name Antares? Well, we probably have the most on-screen information for the Zosa. For example, based on its plaque, we know it was built in the Earth orbit system at the Luna shipyards, meaning it was constructed by humans, if not necessarily Starfleet. We also know that the design dates back to the 23rd century. We know that it's still a viable kind of tramp steamer cargo ship in the 2370s, still able to carry good, valuable cargo, although it seems to operate kind of in the Bajoran, Cardassian region. We know it can be operated by a standard crew of about 12 to 15, but can be at least temporarily flown by one for when Cassidy Yates brings it in. It seems to be about 270-ish meters long, which is a little shorter than the original Enterprise, but considering how thick and bulky it is, means it could probably carry a good chunk of cargo. And we look at the bridge of the Zosa, and it looks very 23rd century. However, the Narkova, a sister ship, has a more modern bridge, which makes sense, meaning that it could be a modular design. And if we kind of grant that this was a bit of a Lego ship that could be reconfigured with different cargo pods and bridge structures, it means we can allow these. This could have been the basic design. This could have been an upgraded design. We don't really know if these extra tubes and everything are engines, but we could maybe suppose they are, or they could be something else for storage or refining of other materials. But if this is a modular design, it means it could be upgraded and altered from its basic plan to suit the needs or the economics of whoever might be flying it. So I could believe it a stretch that all three of these ships are from the same class. Because again, there are variations even within a class, so we could say different types of Antares class. It's like there are different types of, say, Constitution or Galaxy classes. Again, that does leave the Bajoran ship over here out. I think that's just something we could write off to maybe bad intel when it was called an Antares, or maybe they were just calling it that because it was an older ship. Maybe they were expecting to find an Antares, and they didn't. So we just kind of have to write this one off. Fair enough. And then these two are actual Starfleet ships. They just happen to have the name Antares. It's just like how we had the U.S.S. Intrepid that was a Constitution class, or for that matter, U.S.S. Defiant that was a Constitution class, and then later we get an Intrepid class and a Defiant class. Meaning that these are probably the true Antares, which isn't necessarily bad because at least this one and this one are truly referred to as such on screen. Now the middle one, the Arcos, is just kind of seen as a variant and assumed to be the same. Although some places I think have called it the Denev or Deneva class, which fine I suppose, but it's so close to the Batris type over here, just with more stuff stuck on, that I would definitely say these are the same class. And I can allow for the Zoza to be as well. Meaning that within slight alterations because of different cargo modules and different front end arrangements, that the same rough length of 270-ish meters would apply. And they do. They look like workaday, really lived in, worked in ships. You could pull pods off of, put pods on, add engines, take away engines. If you're a wealthy person who needs to get stuff, maybe a smaller high value cargo there in a hurry, you'd put more engines on. If you're not, and it can take time, you can have bigger modules and smaller engines. They must at least be capable of reasonable speed, otherwise Cassidy's ship would not be viable. Plus we see it go from Bajor to Cardassia and around in a reasonable time period, and we see it interacting with the Maquis. So while we don't know the warp, it has to be at least reasonably decent. Warp 5, Warp 6. It's interesting that these can be operated. I mean, it seems like the standard crew of the Arcos here was just 2. Which, if maybe the cargo didn't require a lot of maintenance, you could get away with a pilot, captain, and engineer / first officer. Why not? Again, Cassidy's ship did not seem to have more. Maybe 12. And the Norkova seemed to have maybe the most at around 15, but again it had a higher value cargo, so it could be said that the extra crew might have been cargo handlers or security, which obviously didn't do it very good. We don't know the crew of the Batris, but considering they had at least 3 passengers on board, probably about the same, 10 to 15. So I think we can reasonably say that these are the true Antares class and just rule out the other ones as not being Antares class, even if the name Antares might be applied to them. And that's what's neat about the Eagle Moss collection, is you're going to get everyone doing the hero ships, but who's going to do 3 old ships like these? Now, you might see the Zoza because of its importance in Deep Space Nine, but who's going to do the Batris of the Arcos? Especially the Arcos. I mean, this ship was a secondary visitor of the week ship, and then this one blew up on screen in about 1/10 of a second. The Batris got a little more time. What's interesting, though, is, at least with the Batris and Zoza, we do actually see the inside, which is more than we can say for a lot of ships. If you think about it, we very rarely saw the inside, for example, of a Cardassian ship. And with the exception of a few episodes, not even a lot of Romulan ships. So we do get a better feeling for these than some others. Although, of course, what we saw at Batris was mostly exploding stuff. As to the models, the Batris is pretty simple, but it's pretty much all metal here. It's nice. The Arcos here is still has the same basic metal core, but all the tubes and stuff that were added on are plastic, polymer. and these both stay on their stands very well. The Zosa is a little more wiggly because of how it attaches at the rear, and also because it's very heavy. It's definitely the heaviest of the three. This is nearly all metal, with just some of the small bits and part of the bottom as plastic. But it's definitely the heaviest of the three. And it's the largest scale too. If you look at the engines, the engine bells, the engine nozzles on these are much smaller than these on the Zosa, which are quite large. It's not a bad thing. And the Zosa is the first one we got in the collection. So, and one thing I really like about Eagle Moss too is they don't just take the same mold. It would have been very easy just to take the same Zosa and modify it to be the Batris, or even just take the Batris and modify it to be the Arcos, but they don't. Every time they do a ship, they really do make a new set of tooling, which is interesting. You can also see it with the Merchantman versus the Shellyak colony ship. If they were just going to use the same mold, they would be the same size, but they're not. And you even see it with all the Mirandas. I think they've done, what, 6 Mirandas in all told now? And you would expect that they would just use the same Reliant, but they don't, because each one is slightly different. Slightly bigger, smaller, slightly different details, and that's neat. For some reason, the little U.S.S. Antares here is a small model, but I've noticed that with all the TOS remastered models, they tend to come in small, and I think that just has to do with the size and detail level of the CGI models that Eagle Moss used to make these. If you look at like the Gorn ship and what's the other one I'm thinking of? Oh dear. The Orion ship, there we go, from TOS Remastered. They're small. I don't think they're bad. The nice thing is this is almost all metal. Even part of the nacelles and stuff's metal, the whole thing. It's pretty weighty, even though it's quite small. And when you set it next to the Constitution model, it actually scales quite well. So, it's alright. And that's kind of the same here. The Batris could be considered to be a little small, but I don't know why you'd need it to be bigger. And the Zosa is certainly impressive. But it always confused me as a kid, all the different Antares ships around, and I think I've at least kind of established a certain lineage, some mild sense of sanity from my own head canon. So, what do you think? You think I'm on the right path here, or completely bonkers? I mean, I am completely bonkers, but yeah, because of this. Anyway, I think they're neat in this, even though these aren't the newest ships in the collection. I just felt like revisiting them tonight. And I did do a video, I don't know if I'll publish this one or that one first, looking at the kind of evolution of the Husnock ship and this ship and everything. But this is probably, the Batris is one of the most heavily rebuilt and reused models in all of Star Trek. They even used it in Voyager in the episode Author, where it's shown as a ore freighter, which in its, if not Starfleet, at least Federation, which shows you this is just a design that humans built and has kind of just made its way throughout the Alpha Quadrant. So I'm not bugged with the fact that this is said to be a Tellurian. They never said they built it, they just said they own it. And it could have even been built for them by a human shipyard, why not? But this one is definitively owned and operated by humans, and this one is potentially at least operating under the Paterian name, but it's owned and operated by humans too. So the evidence seems to indicate that usually these are at least operated by humans or human-friendly species, and the Tellurians, they had a war with the humans, but they seem to be at least on decent terms by the time of Next Generation. They could have also just captured it, which would explain why they gave it their paint job. But then again, the Norcova is more in that paint scheme too, and again, it's definitively Federation. Anyway, see how I find this stuff kind of fun. And it seems like Eagle Moss does really well with their secondary models. I don't know why, but they do. So, what do you think? With that, please like, share, and subscribe, and feel free to drop a comment. This is Misha, and I'll catch you very soon. Next time.